911, what's the location of the emergency?
My daughter is missing.
What's your address, ma'am?
She's gone. We can't find her anywhere. I've called all her friends.
How old is she?
11.
Okay, what's her name, ma'am?
Carlie, Carlie.
And last name?
Brucia, Brucia.
This is the harrowing story of Carlie Brucia, an 11-year-old girl from Sarasota, Florida, whose abduction in broad daylight shocked the nation. Captured on surveillance footage, her disappearance sent ripples of fear and heartbreak through every corner of the country. But Carlie's case was more than a tragedy. It became a symbol of systemic failures in justice and parole systems. It raised painful questions about how someone with a violent criminal past could walk free, and why the safeguards designed to protect the vulnerable had failed so catastrophically. Today, we'll walk you through the events leading to Carlie's disappearance, the desperate search to find her, and the relentless pursuit of justice that followed. This is not just a story about loss, it's a call to action, a reminder of the urgency to protect our children, and an account of a community united by grief but determined to make a difference. Before we dive into the events of that fateful evening, let's take a moment to learn about the people at the heart of this story, Carlie Brucia and her family. Carlie was a spirited and vibrant 11-year-old. Known for her kind heart and resilience, she was the type of child who left a mark on everyone she met. Carlie was the light of her mother, Susan Schorpener's life, and deeply loved by her stepfather, Stephen. Together, the family shared a strong bond, one built on love and support. When Carlie didn't come home that night, Susan and Stephen's world turned upside down. Their immediate and relentless efforts to find her underscored the depth of their devotion to the daughter they adored. They would stop at nothing to bring her back. But Carlie's disappearance wasn't the work of chance. It was the calculated act of a man who should never have been free to roam the streets. Joseph Smith was a 37-year-old mechanic whose life was a spiral of crime and addiction. His criminal history included drug abuse, violent offenses, and even kidnapping. Despite his lengthy rap sheet, Smith was out on parole at the time of Carlie's abduction. He was a man who had slipped through the cracks of the justice system, a system that had failed not just Carlie, but the entire community. As we move forward in this story, keep these names and faces in mind: Carlie, Susan, Stephen, and the man whose actions would tear their world apart, Joseph Smith. It was a peaceful Sunday evening on January 31st, 2004, in Sarasota, Florida. The streets were quiet, and most families were settling in for Super Bowl Sunday. For 11-year-old Carlie Brucia, the day had been filled with the kind of joy and laughter you'd expect from a sleepover with a close friend. She had spent the night at her friend's house, enjoying every moment of carefree fun. But by 6 p.m., it was time for her to head home. Carlie was eager to catch the Super Bowl with her family, and when her friend's mother asked if she'd be okay walking the short distance home, Carlie was confident. "It's just a mile," she might have said with the assurance of an 11-year-old who had always been mature for her age. With a quick goodbye, Carlie stepped out the door, ready for what should have been an uneventful walk home. But Carlie would never make it. Shortly after Carlie left, her friend's mother, perhaps sensing a twinge of unease, decided to call Susan Schorpen, Carlie's mom, just to let her know Carlie was walking home. The call, which might have been meant to ease Susan's mind, had the opposite effect. Susan froze. Carlie hadn't asked for permission to walk, and the idea of her daughter navigating the streets alone didn't sit well with her. Turning to her husband, Stephen, she said firmly, "I don't like this. She shouldn't be walking alone." Stephen, ever the protector, didn't hesitate. Grabbing his car keys, he headed out the door. His mission was simple: find Carlie, pick her up, and bring her home safely. Stephen drove the route Carlie would have taken, his eyes scanning every corner, every sidewalk, and every driveway. The streets were mostly empty, with just the occasional car passing by. It should have been easy to spot her, but Carlie wasn't there. He drove the loop a second time, then a third. With each pass, his heart pounded harder. Could she have taken a different path? Could he have missed her? When Stephen returned home empty-handed, the air in the house changed. Susan's unease turned into dread. "Something's wrong," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "This isn't like her." The two of them got back in the car, this time together. Their search became frantic, their calls for Carlie echoing into the night. They drove slowly, leaning out the windows, shouting her name into the growing darkness. As they combed the area, something strange caught their attention. A red tow truck was driving slowly along the streets, almost as if its driver was searching for something or someone. The sight unnerved them, but their focus was still on finding Carlie. Minutes later, when they arrived at the friend's house Carlie had left earlier, their unease turned into suspicion. There it was, the same red tow truck parked in front of the house. They learned the truck belonged to Ron Chiquette, the boyfriend of Carlie's friend's mother. The timing of his presence and the earlier sighting of the truck raised red flags. What was he doing driving around the neighborhood while they were searching for Carlie? Police would later question Chiquette and determine that his alibi checked out. He had no connection to Carlie's disappearance, but in that moment, for Susan and Stephen, the unease lingered. As the minutes ticked into hours, their desperation grew. They called Carlie's friends, hoping she might have gone to one of their houses. No one had seen her. Every dead end tightened the grip of fear on Susan's heart. Finally, at 7:30 p.m., Susan picked up the phone and dialed 911.
911, what's the location of the emergency?
My daughter is missing.
What's your address, ma'am? And your phone number? Okay. Has she been missing before?
No, she had a fight with her girlfriend. She decided to walk home, and we've been driving around for about an hour and a half. And it's now an hour and a half walk. She's gone. We can't find her anywhere. I've called all her friends.
How old is she?
11.
And when was the last time that she was seen?
It was at 6 o'clock, Jean. Around 6 o'clock.
And she was at a friend's house?
Yeah.
Okay, what's her name, ma'am?
Carlie, C-A-R-L-I-E.
And last name?
Brucia, B-R-U-C-I-A. She's just shy of 5 feet.
Okay. Do you know how much she weighs?
She's around 120 pounds.
Okay, what color hair does she have?
Dirty blonde.
And what color eyes?
Blue.
Police responded quickly. They issued an alert and began searching the area. Carlie's family and friends printed missing person flyers with her picture on them and handed them out to anyone who would take one. By nightfall, the streets were covered in posters, and officers were combing the area with flashlights, calling out Carlie's name. But Carlie was nowhere to be found. For Susan and Stephen, the dread was unbearable. Something wasn't adding up. Carlie wasn't the type of child to wander off or run away. As the hours passed, their fears deepened. This wasn't just a case of a child being late. Something much darker was at play. What no one realized yet was that Carlie's walk home had become the perfect opportunity for someone with sinister intentions. A predator was lurking in the shadows, and Carlie had unknowingly crossed his path. This was no accident. This was the beginning of a nightmare. The search for Carlie Brucia was in full swing. Her family, friends, and the Sarasota community had come together, distributing flyers, calling out her name, and holding on to hope. But as the hours stretched into the following day, there was still no sign of the 11-year-old. It was during this time that investigators made a chilling discovery, a break in the case that would shake everyone to their core. A local car wash near Carlie's route home had surveillance cameras positioned around the property. Police approached the business, hoping for any clue that might reveal what happened to Carlie. What they found was worse than anyone could have imagined. The grainy footage showed Carlie walking along the edge of the car wash parking lot, unaware she was being followed. And then a man appeared. He moved casually at first, blending in with his surroundings. But as he neared Carlie, his demeanor shifted. He stepped directly into her path, blocking her way. Carlie froze for a moment, startled. The man said something to her, his body language dominant, threatening. Before she could react, he grabbed her arm and led her away out of the camera's frame. That moment, the last time Carlie was seen alive, was burned into the minds of investigators, her family, and the entire community. Carlie's parents were devastated when the footage was shown to them. They confirmed what police feared. The girl in the video was Carlie. But the man? He was a stranger to everyone. The suspect was described as a white male with dark hair, tattoos on his forearms, and an intimidating presence. He wore a mechanic's jumpsuit with a name tag, though the poor quality of the footage made it impossible to read. As news of the video spread, it ignited a wave of fear throughout Sarasota. This wasn't a case of a runaway child. Carlie had been abducted in broad daylight by a violent predator. Police acted quickly. A BOLO, be on the lookout alert, was issued for the man in the footage. Officers intensified their search, canvassing neighborhoods and questioning anyone who might have seen something. Flyers with Carlie's face were handed out and posted everywhere, on street corners and shop windows and on car windshields. Tips began flooding in, but most were dead ends. Detectives knew they had to work fast. Every moment Carlie was missing increased the likelihood that her abductor would harm her. They began with the people closest to Carlie. Her stepfather, Stephen, was questioned, as is protocol in cases involving missing children. Though he had spent hours searching for Carlie himself, investigators needed to rule him out. His alibi, corroborated by Susan and others, cleared him. They also revisited Ron Choquette, the man with the red tow truck who had been spotted near Carlie's route. Despite the timing of his presence, police verified his alibi and eliminated him as a suspect. With the family and Choquette cleared, investigators were left with little to go on beyond the chilling surveillance footage. Who was the man who had taken Carlie? How had he crossed paths with her? And where had he taken her? The answers would come soon enough, but they wouldn't bring relief. They would reveal a tragedy that no one was prepared for. As the days passed, the urgency to find Carlie Brucia grew. Investigators were racing against time, piecing together fragments of evidence, scouring for leads, and chasing down every tip that came in. And then, the breakthrough came. Several tips pointed to a name: Joseph Smith. Smith was a 37-year-old mechanic with a long and troubling criminal history. Known to local law enforcement, Smith had a record filled with drug offenses, violent acts, and even prior incidents of kidnapping. At the time of Carlie's disappearance, he was out on parole. Investigators took a closer look at the surveillance footage from the car wash. The grainy image of Carlie's abductor showed a man with dark hair, tattoos on his forearms, and a mechanic's jumpsuit. The description matched Joseph Smith perfectly. But it wasn't just the footage that implicated him. Several witnesses had called in after seeing the video, identifying Smith based on his mannerisms and appearance. One of those witnesses was a co-worker who worked alongside him at an auto shop. Police now had a name, but they needed more. They paid a visit to Smith at a home he was staying at with friends, Jeffrey and Naomi Pincus. At first, Smith wasn't cooperative. He denied any involvement, claiming he had been at home watching the Super Bowl during the time Carlie was abducted. But investigators noticed something troubling: scratches on his hands and arms, subtle yet suspicious. Then came another critical detail. Smith had borrowed Jeffrey and Naomi's yellow station wagon the day Carlie disappeared. He claimed he had only used it to visit a nearby marina, but when police searched the car, they uncovered a damning piece of evidence. Fibers found in the backseat of the station wagon matched the clothing Carlie had been wearing when she was abducted. This discovery confirmed investigators' worst fears. Carlie had been in that vehicle. But even as the evidence mounted, Smith refused to cooperate. He remained cold and detached, offering no insight into Carlie's whereabouts. The case took another turn when Joseph Smith's brother John contacted police. John told investigators that Joseph had called him from jail, confessing to a crime that would forever scar the Brucia family. According to John, Joseph admitted to abducting and assaulting Carlie, but he claimed his memory of the incident was foggy, blaming it on drug use. What Joseph couldn't deny, however, was where he left her. John revealed that Joseph had directed him to a wooded area behind a church, just a few miles from where Carlie had been taken. Police immediately rushed to the scene, praying that they might find Carlie alive. But what they discovered was every parent's worst nightmare. Carlie's body was found partially hidden in the woods, lifeless. The autopsy revealed the extent of the brutality she faced in her final moments. Carlie had been bound at the wrists, violently assaulted, and ultimately strangled to death. The forensic evidence was irrefutable. DNA traces left behind matched Joseph Smith, linking him directly to the crime. With every new detail, the case against Smith grew stronger, painting a picture of a man who had preyed on an innocent child with unimaginable cruelty. But the discovery of Carlie's body didn't just devastate her family, it sent shockwaves through the Sarasota community and beyond. News of Joseph Smith's criminal history quickly came to light. Over the past decade, Smith had been arrested more than a dozen times. His record included drug offenses, violence against women, kidnapping, and probation violations. Despite this, he had remained a free man, walking the streets even as he posed a clear threat to society. Just a month before Carlie's abduction, police had requested a warrant for Smith's arrest due to a probation violation. But shockingly, no warrant was issued. The reason? Allegedly, the necessary paperwork hadn't been completed. This revelation ignited outrage. How could a man with such a dangerous past, one who had already demonstrated violent tendencies, be allowed to remain free? How could a procedural failure have allowed Joseph Smith to continue walking among innocent people, culminating in Carlie's horrific death? The outrage wasn't limited to Sarasota. Carlie's case became a lightning rod for national discussions about the justice system, parole policies, and the responsibility of law enforcement to prioritize public safety. Community members demanded answers and accountability. Rallies were held, petitions circulated, and calls for reform echoed across Florida. Carlie's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a failure of a system that should have protected her. For Susan and Stephen Kanzler, however, the public outcry didn't change the heartbreaking reality. Carlie was gone. While they supported the push for change, their focus was now on seeking justice for their daughter. They wanted to ensure that Joseph Smith could never harm another child. The evidence against Smith was overwhelming, and the legal process was moving forward. But for Carlie's family and the community, the road to justice would be long and filled with painful reminders of the loss they had suffered. By 2005, the pieces of Carlie Brucia's tragic case had come together. The evidence against Joseph Smith, DNA, surveillance footage, and his own confessions to his family was overwhelming. The time had come for justice to be served. Smith stood trial for the brutal abduction, assault, and murder of Carlie. The courtroom was filled with emotion, anger, sorrow, and a shared determination to see him held accountable for his horrific crimes. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence. They played the haunting surveillance footage showing Carlie being forcibly taken by Smith. They detailed the findings from the autopsy, showing the unimaginable suffering Carlie endured. And they highlighted Smith's history of violence, painting a picture of a man who had been a ticking time bomb for years. The jury deliberated and returned with their verdict: guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and battery of a child under 12. For his heinous crimes, Joseph Smith was sentenced to death. The judge, echoing the sentiments of a devastated community, described Smith's actions as some of the most depraved he had ever seen. But while the sentencing provided some sense of closure, it didn't erase the pain Carlie's family endured. No punishment could bring her back or undo the tragedy they'd lived through. However, the legal battle didn't end there. In 2017, Smith's death sentence was vacated due to a technicality. A new law required a unanimous jury vote for capital punishment, but the jury in Smith's original trial had voted 10-2 in favor of the death penalty. This decision reignited frustration and grief among Carlie's loved ones in the community. Smith would ultimately die in prison in 2021, awaiting a new sentencing hearing. Carlie's case didn't just result in a conviction, it sparked a reckoning. Across Florida, and eventually the nation, people began questioning how the justice system handles high-risk offenders like Joseph Smith. For Carlie's family, justice was bittersweet. They had fought tirelessly to ensure Smith was held accountable, but their loss was irreplaceable. Yet Carlie's memory lived on, inspiring change and reminding the world of the importance of vigilance, accountability, and justice. Joseph Smith may have been brought to justice, but Carlie's story remains a painful reminder of how easily lives can be shattered when systems meant to protect us fail. Carlie Brucia's case was more than a heartbreaking tragedy. It was a story that resonated deeply with millions across the nation. Her abduction and murder symbolized the fragility of life, the unspeakable pain of loss, and the devastating consequences when the systems designed to protect us fail. The haunting surveillance footage of Carlie's final moments stayed with everyone who saw it. It wasn't just an image of a child taken too soon. It was a wake-up call. It forced parents, communities, and lawmakers to confront uncomfortable truths about safety, accountability, and justice. For parents, Carlie's story served as a stark reminder of the dangers children face, even in seemingly familiar and safe environments. It prompted countless families to have difficult but necessary conversations about personal safety, the risks posed by strangers, and how to respond in situations that feel wrong. One of the most powerful lessons to emerge from Carlie's case was the importance of empowering children to protect themselves. Teaching kids simple, actionable safety measures, like identifying safe adults, using a safe word system with parents, and resisting abductors early, became a priority for families everywhere. Experts emphasize the value of encouraging children to scream, fight, and make a scene if someone tries to take them. Early resistance can disrupt an abductor's plans, increasing the chance of escape. Carlie's case reinforced that message in a way no parent could ignore. But beyond these lessons, Carlie's case left a mark on the collective psyche of a nation. It reminded us of how quickly innocence can be stolen, and how we all have a responsibility to look out for the most vulnerable among us. Her story became a call to action, not just for parents, but for communities and lawmakers. It pushed for reforms, stronger safeguards, and a deeper commitment to ensuring that no other child would suffer a fate like Carlie's. If you've been moved by Carlie's story and want to help us share important cases like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you'll join a community that values justice, awareness, and action. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. What lessons did Carlie's case teach you? How can we work together to protect our communities? Leave a comment below and let us know. Your voice matters, and together we can keep these conversations going. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Stay safe.